We made a promise to our community. We said we were going to build a brand that hopefully one day hundreds of millions of people will know and love. And against all odds, practically no funding, we pulled off one of the biggest moments in NFT history. And this is how we did it.
Luca Netz, a serial entrepreneur who sold for more than $500 million in consumer packaged goods.
The CEO and owner of Pudgy Penguins Web3's leading IP company.
What's your next move to get everyone on the planet own a physical Pudgy Penguin?
So I don't just want to be the next great penguin. I want to be the next great penguin that is the face of crypto.
You launch your layer 2.
We're building an L2, not just to build an L2. We're building an L2 to be the biggest L2. We are going to win by community, culture, and distribution. Who can build the best community, who can have the best cultural products, and who can get the most eyeballs.
What is the role of Little Pudgies and Roads?
That NFT is our first edition, and it needs to be worth a lot. The right NFT project outperforms staked ETH. I want you to take your staked ETH out of your 5% pool, because Pudgy Penguins over the course of 5 years will outperform 5% a year.
To have some airdrop alpha for the penguin community.
Man, look, I know there's some big people building that own penguins, and I know they've got protocols set to launch by the end of the year. I would be surprised if we didn't get another. That's all I can say.
What's your take on meme coins?
Again, it's not my place to say, but I think 99% of people watching this don't know what's really going on behind the scenes.
What's your next big move to make everyone aware of Pudgy Penguins via social networks?
Well, I'm working on a deal. It's too early for me to talk about it. But if I pull this deal off, it'll be the biggest headline in crypto scene all year. I promise.
75% of you that watch this channel frequently do not subscribe. If you like this show and think it provides value to you in your crypto investing journey, can you please do me a favor and subscribe to this channel? Hit the like button and leave a comment below. It helps this channel more than you can imagine. The bigger the channel, the bigger the guests, and the better the conversation. Thank you. Today's conversation is supported by Jupiter, the most used decentralized exchange in crypto and the largest DEX by volume on Solana. Mantle, a leading Ethereum layer 2 with more than $2 billion in total value locked and $3 billion in liquid treasury. And Astar Network, a scalable network connecting people to Web3 through entertainment, blockchain development, and community events. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you
Good
too.
to see you. How are you?
Good. Exactly. Token 24.
Token 2049, the last one was in Singapore last year.
And this is when I met you for the first time.
Exactly. And so basically, shortly after we last talked on this podcast in September last year, you tweeted, and it's still your pinned tweet, right? One small step for Pudgy Penguins, one giant leap for Web3. Web3 IP and blockchain technology are now in front and center in the world's biggest retailer.
Yeah.
How did landing a Walmart deal to sell Pudgy Penguin plushies and toys change the game for what you're building?
I think, we made a promise to our community, and we said we were going to build a brand that tens of millions, and if hopefully one day hundreds of millions of people will know and love. And against all odds, in the depths of the bear, with practically no funding, we pulled off, I think, one of the biggest moments in NFT history, because one, the brand is so young in its infancy. The timeline in which we did it basically Walmart had placed the order and we'd shipped them basically 2,000 pallets in under 3 months, which if you know consumer product, that's extremely hard. We had tied a physical to digital bridge. So the idea is every time you buy a Pudgy Penguin toy, there's a QR code. You scan that QR code, you make an account on Pudgy World. That account is then, attached to an abstracted wallet. So a custody wallet through a custody wallet solution. We had to make that. And then you get 3 to 5 NFTs that are traits that go on your soul-bound Pudgy Penguin, all through a gasless experience. And we basically did that from start. The tech side, we knew it was coming, so we basically had 6 months to do that. And then the actual logistical hurdle of making that many toys and distributing it and making sure it came out on time, we had 3 months. And I think for us as the underdogs to pull off something like that, with the resources and the positioning that we were in and all of the context, I think it shows a lot of things. One, it shows the industry that you don't need $100 million to go and be productive and to push the brand forward and to get your community excited. A lot of, the previous projects before us, claimed that they needed a lot of money to execute on their vision. And I think we've shown the world otherwise. I think it's the first time that NFTs were legitimized, and not because they were a trend. That's a very real activation in a very competitive space where the world's biggest IPs and biggest brands compete for real estate. And we didn't just have any piece of real estate. We had a pallet in the middle of the store. And that's some of the most prized real estate, especially in Q4, that anybody can get in a store like Walmart or Target. And so I think just all of that context, how we were able to do it, the story of Pudgy, us actually being able to sell through so that Walmart reordered, right? We sold them 800,000 toys. It was a huge risk. It was a risk that if I would have failed, we would have shot ourselves in the foot big time, but I knew that it was necessary to take that leap. So the fact that we were able to see that through, sell out the amount that we needed to sell out to ultimately get a reorder, and for them to reorder and say, hey, you guys are in the store now for the next 8 months, which is basically the program we're in now. We're in an 8-month-long program. The program we launched with was a 2-month program, basically to see if, it was a huge bet that they made on us, a huge risk on our side from a brand integrity standpoint. And the fact that we were just able to see that through, we have over 100 and I think 30 or 140,000 people who actually have Pudgy wallets who've redeemed those NFTs.
I was about to ask that actually. Key numbers of like this kind of trial in Walmart. What happened afterwards with big other kind of like retail chains, right?
Yeah.
Key numbers of sales, revenue, and also, as you said, right? How, because the awareness needs to be there. Like it's cool to sell. It's amazing to sell some plushies or toys, but then the next level is people being even aware or even caring that there is a Pudgy world out there where you can do something more, right?
Yeah. So by the time this interview comes out, you and I will talk, but we're launching in Target in a couple of weeks. By the time this releases, we'll be there at the checkout aisle. So, right when you check out, you'll see the penguin right in front of your face. The success from Walmart has permeated. We're distributing, big time in Russia right now, in Southeast Asia, starting to really get our foothold in Europe. Walmart's going great. We're about to go into Target. We got another one that's going to be later down the line, but it's just as big as the other two. So we're going to kind of hit all three facets. So super excited about that. Since we launched the toys last May, almost a year, it will be 1 million units sold. My biggest success from a consumer product unit basis has been Pudgy. Between the community, between the algorithm, between, our marketing efforts to sell over 1 million units. It from a consumer facing perspective and from a true mass adoption perspective, and not mass adoption in consumer based on price going up, right? Because we see that all the time, and we've been seeing that for at least 5 or 6 years now, where we get mass adoption and consumer adoption when prices are going up and people are making money. But that to me is not real consumer adoption and not real mass adoption, because that is predicated on the financialization of cryptocurrency and that being the end state. And I actually think the end state is greater than that. I actually believe in blockchain technology and digital ownership and transparency and a slew of these other, pros that I think come with tokenization that I think have just as big TAMs and solve just as big of a problem as payments and moving money or close to it. And I think this is the first time crypto's ever been kind of packaged in this way that, whether you're a 5-year-old or a 60-year-old or Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever your interests or demographics are, you can package this in something that people understand, and then give them kind of an onboarding mechanism that is really not intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just the success of what we've seen just on the toy side, again, we're not a toy company, right? Like we're an IP company focused on onboarding the next 100 million people on chain, and, IP infrastructure, I think, are really like the two main facets that we're kind of building for. But I believe it's an incredible case study, and the first ever case study where we've seen adoption and growth around something that's crypto native, but isn't dependent or driven by price going up and price going down. And I think this is really special. And in some shape, way, or form, we've already written, our page in the history books. A lot more to go, obviously, but yeah.
So you just said we already written our page in the history book, but page can be easily forgotten, right?
Yeah.
Especially in this industry.
Agreed.
So talking about plushies and toys only right now.
Yeah.
What's your next move to get everyone on the planet own a physical Pudgy Penguin? Or as many people as possible.
So there's a couple things. We've come into a really big infrastructure problem at Pudgy. And we didn't set out to be an infrastructure company first. Obviously, we set out to build the world's biggest next great IP. But to me, I think it's really disingenuous to build the world's next greatest IP and to not have crypto native layers integrated into that, right? So I don't just want to be the next great penguin. I want to be the next great penguin that is the face of crypto and that is integrating this technology and actually onboarding people, because that means more to me than I think that's a more important objective than just building the world's next great IP. And I think you can do them both at the same time. Now, what we found is there's a lot of fragmentation from the chain side. And what I mean by that is, the best account abstractions on ZK saying the lowest fees are on Base. Arbitrum has a slew of tooling that, is significantly better than some of the other chains for really positioning for consumer mass. And I actually think there's a huge opportunity for somebody to come out with an L2 that is positioned to be that L2 for consumers. Consumers in the way that Pudgy's doing it, consumers in the way that, people are building Socialfy and consumer applications. And I'm seeing this really big gap in the market and understanding that, what we've done from a vertical integration needs a lot of work to really take it to escape velocity. And there's a huge lack of horizontal integrations to actually help us and support us to do that vision. So, we're currently in the process of exploring and acquiring an L2 and building that infrastructure to ultimately take us to the next level. And I think that will create a flywheel and a network effect that I think will just take Pudgy further. Because for us, Pudgy's at the center of all of this, right? Everything that we do is around the penguin. But I think for us to really take it up a notch, and I know some things that obviously I can't disclose from a penguin side. Things are about to get really big here over the next year and a half. And we have some big ambitions to integrate, Web3 technology into these big moments. But I don't think the current infrastructure from third parties can sustain it, because I don't think they actually know what building for mass is, right? We're in a unique spot because we're one of a couple people that have actually built for mass. And when you build for mass, the problems that come with that. And we think we need to solve them.
So infrastructure problem, and you're just saying, listen, like no one will solve it for us. So basically we'll do it ourselves, right?
We have to. And I'm also just thinking about, what it means to be in a bull market and the arena that is a bull market. I have to pull crypto native levers to make things exciting. And so we were going to kind of just tread along the way that we were doing it, but I'm just seeing the writing on the wall. You have to play the game or the game will eat you up and spit you out. And again, this was always a part of our roadmap. I'm just now pushing the button on it sooner than I thought I would, because to actually achieve the end goals that we want to achieve, I just don't think you can do it any other way.
Because the initial, and it's also how I structured this today. I was talking, we talked a bit about the plushes and the toys, right?
Yeah.
So physical. Then I wanted to talk about the digital aspect, which is more the social media, which is again something that, a lot of projects, they focus on Twitter and crypto, right? But they don't really understand or even care about the fact that the masses are not necessarily on Twitter. Crypto Twitter is an echo chamber, right? So you guys are, so let's start with, let's continue with this digital part, which is more the kind of social media one. You were already killing it in terms of views last time we talked, right? Instagram, Giphy. How has this evolved in the last, 8 to 9 months?
We're just making it better. It's just getting more efficient. We're getting more views. And probably since the last time we spoke, viewership is probably up 100% across the board. We finally got the TikTok going, the Facebook's going. And so I think just the quality of the content significantly improved. We're starting to play around with things, and things that kind of looked, that were done cheaply just because of resources, we're investing more money in. And then now we're really working on a big long form content program. We want to get people more emotionally involved. We want to make the content longer. We want to start telling a story. And so I think that's really our next step on the digital content side.
What's your next big move to make everyone aware of Pudgy Penguins via social networks and messaging apps? Because that's one of the things you were really good at already, right?
Yeah.
Even people on Teams would just use Pudgy Penguin without knowing, but like there's in everything you do, whether the physical or the digital or the crypto side, there is always a point where you could say, okay, cool, like we're there, we're good. And that's probably when, if you double down, you make a massive impact, right? Instead of stopping there.
Well, I'm working on a deal. It's too easy. It's too early for me to talk about it. But if I pull this deal off, it'll be the biggest headline in crypto scene all year. I would tell you that.
Fair enough.
I promise. So just know I'm working on something big there. And we have a partnership with Telegram, and I'm going to a lot of the Asian messaging apps like, Line and Kakao and a bunch of the others. And I definitely want to integrate and permeate, the IP in those directions. But I will tell you, this deal's taking up a lot of my time. So the last couple of months I've been on a hiatus, meaning I've been working on two things, which is like really capitalizing the company in a really strong capacity. Cause I think the proof is in the pudding. We've proved ourselves. And then also working on this deal. And this deal is a monster deal. It's one that's doesn't get done in a month. It takes, 6 to 12 months to really pull it off. But hopefully I have it done and we announce it by the end of the year. And this will make seismic shockwaves throughout the industry. Nobody will see this one coming. So I'll tell you that.
You talked about the infrastructure, and one of the moves you made in the infrastructure is Overpass IP.
Yeah.
What is Overpass IP and why did you build it?
So Overpass is a licensing platform that makes licensing easy with a couple clicks of a button on, when licensing Web3 IP. The idea is every time we make products in the real world, we actually license the IP from community members. I think it's really symbolic towards the Web3 ethos. And I think it's important to kind of build in that spirit. We did a beta test. We were going to officially launch it, and then we realized we were acquiring Frame and we were building the L2. And then so we're going to officially launch it as a dApp on the L2. And so I'm just like, again, this is where the flywheel starts to make sense, right? I need to build this tooling. I need to build this infrastructure. These things on its face are huge sunk costs. I don't know how much Overpass costs us, but somewhere between, $500,000 and $800,000. And it's not a great return on revenue, but it solves a huge problem. But maybe there's a way in which, you could tokenize it or do something interesting and benefit the community and really start getting momentum and volume in that direction. And we just need to build this infrastructure and build this tooling. The writing on the wall, it's just clear. For example, people don't even know that Pudgy Penguins has a wallet. We have a wallet with, I think, just north, as of this conversation, just north of 150,000 people, we made that. That needs to be built out in a bigger way, but this is like an example of, the tooling that we're making, but, it's solving problems, but it's also costing us a lot of money to do it. So kind of just put it in this flywheel so it becomes a sustainable value proposition and also something that can benefit the community in a really big way, right? A wallet with millions of users can benefit the community in 10 different ways. Overpass IP tokenized can, help the community in tons of different ways. Having a base layer that powers all of that basically Penguins govern, benefits Penguins in an amazing way, right? So I want to be the face of consumer crypto. I think Pudgy Penguins is already that, and if not, a close second. If for some reason you think Coinbase is leading that charge, which would be fair, obviously with the base. But from my perspective, this is the final frontier. Everyone is building the same thing that I think we've been building for the last 5 or 6 years. People are still stuck in this tech mindset, more tech, better tech. And I actually think people are not seeing the writing on the wall and the real problem, which is distribution. We have a cataclysmic distribution problem, and it's the same people sloshing the same money around with more big players coming in and prices going up, and everybody thinks it's okay, but it's actually not. It's a master distribution problem, and if you don't solve it sooner rather than later, crypto will be stuck in a bubble of it's just a Ponzi, it's just greedy people, it's just a casino. If you can't actually make real world applications within the next 5 years, if you can't actually crack the consumer distribution problem, everybody's bag will have a ceiling on it, because you'll be stuck in a narrative and in a taboo that will take 10, 15, 20 years for like the generations to kind of cycle out, for like that to be reinvented. Consumer is the final frontier. It's the most important frontier. And so when we're building like our L2, that's what I want to solve for. Nobody talks about it, but 95% of the tech on all of these L2s is exactly the same. Nothing differentiates them really, except for a couple things. Where that game can be won, because keep in mind, we're building an L2 not to just build an L2. We're building an L2 to be the biggest L2. It might sound crazy, but they thought we were crazy when we said we'd be the biggest NFT project, and we basically did that. We are going to win by community, culture, and distribution. This is the independent variables. These are the X factors going into this cycle and the cycles to follow. Who can build the best community? Who can have the best cultural products built on top of that infrastructure? And who can distribute? Who can get the most eyeballs? Everyone's thinking about the best new tech. It is so redundant. I swear. I swear. The tech will be in its final state soon, I promise, based on what I've seen. But this is where I think we really want to double down and where we want to win.
It's very refreshing, because we knew that already, right? That you're one of the most, I won't say only, but few very practical people in the space. And I talk to a lot of these L1 founders on the podcast. And one of the questions that every time I have when I talk to a L2 founder or L1 founder is, do we really need another layer 1? Do we really need another layer 2? And their answer is, yeah, it's good to have people trying different things and different routes, and which is kind of fair, but you never really know, trying to be politically correct, but also critical, right? You never really know if it's really that, or if it's not partly how the crypto industry is built, which is you have the centralized exchanges, the market makers. What are the kind of projects that are proven to work, giving good return to investors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every layer 2 that is launching is going to be, 2 to 5 billion.
Yeah.
Every layer 1 that is launching is going to be whatever, 5, 10 billion or 15 billion. So it's kind of a win, even if there is not real adoption, because of how the whole thing is structured and built, right? And what you're doing here is kind of calling out a bit and saying, hey guys, it's fine to do that, but it's not going to bring us anywhere else. If anything else that people are saying, this is kind of a bit, not scamming, but hey, what the fuck are you doing, guys? There's no adoption. And if you want to get out of this, actually, we had just before Luke Belmar and Meow from Jupiter, and he was saying, guys, this final word we're that. Guys, now it's the moment where in the next few years, we need to freaking get into mass adoption. Otherwise, we're never going to get out of this small niche thing, because the Web3 opponents will have the weapons and the excuse to basically come and say, hey guys, this is all scammy and there's nothing out of that, right?
This is, you brought up the elephant in the room, and the thing that I think nobody really addresses.
People are not going to like that.
No, they're not going to like it, but it's true. And again, it's kind of built in the same spirit. So I think in its principle, people building the full stack and the full funnel of the business, I agree with. but it's the spirit in which you build it and why you build it, right? I think people build it to be opportunists. And obviously, like, I'm conscious of the opportunity, but that's not the driving factor. Like, does it make sense in the stack that we're currently building? Because the conversation that I had with like our advisors and the people that really mentor us in this business is like, on our current path, we will already be worth billions of dollars. I think our path to winning the NFT race is abundantly clear. I believe, and you know, the path to being what Disney is going to look like in 2050 and 2025 is abundantly clear, right? And we know we can get there. But the problem is if you're looking at the mistakes of the people before us, which is like, I harp on this all the time, when they started to release the things that they started to release, they broke, right? Like, you can just take that principle and apply it to all of the major projects that came before us and see where things went wrong. Something in their system was breaking, whether it was a business system, whether it was an infrastructure system. And I think for us, I see the writing on the wall. The writing on the wall is, if we can't get consumer distribution, which right now is impossible, it's really hard to get, because I can tell you, as somebody who's getting consumer distribution, the infrastructure is not up to par, then this thing is going to get, you're going to be stuck in, you're going to have a ceiling, right? And the point of crypto is crypto needs to take market share from everything, right? But it won't if we go 20 years, which we're going to get close to being, you know, this thing being around for 20 years now, right? Like, we're already at 15, 5 more years and it's 20 years. If you can't actually break through, the internet broke through after 20 years, after 15 years, right? If this thing doesn't break through, I think within the next 5 years, we will have a ceiling. And I think everyone will still continue to make money, and we'll have our cycles and we'll have our opportunities, but it won't be the potential that I think it can be. And so you have to build for consumer, you have to build for mass. And for us, it just makes sense to have that full stack, right? From top of the funnel IP to the base layer in which all this stuff is built, to the dApps that support both the IP and the base layer. It just makes sense for us, I think.
So these are future massive announcements and a lot of obviously work to be done there. And so one of the impacts, obviously, that this Walmart deal that you landed and shared had is people starting to go crazy about Pudgy Penguins, right? Last time we talked, I think the floor price was about 4 ETH. And then we went on this kind of crazy journey where it went up to like 21, 22 ETH. I think around December or January, everyone on crypto Twitter was talking only about Pudgy Penguins, Pudgy Penguins, Pudgy Penguins, right? And then obviously what happened is it's not an up-only mode. We're about down to 10 ETH now. So it's been quite a ride. How did you personally live the rise of Pudgy Penguin awareness and everyone talking about it on Twitter?
I think we know how to do that, right? So, like, I kind of thought about it. I was like, growing up, I grew up like really, you know my story with my mom, you know, really poor, and like was always kind of left out. So I always was like a class clown. I kind of like attention. I don't like it for me, but I don't like not having it. So I think I'm kind of a master at getting, if I want people to talk about us, I can get us. And that's what drives volume and awareness and ultimately FOMO. And that's what drives, the thing is, you can't do it all the time. So people are like, you know, we had the whole ETH loan contagion thing. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I'm not going to explain it here, but basically ETH loans on NFTs cascaded, kind of brought the whole market down. But like, you know, I'm not going to sit here and be like, we're the best. Well, like ETH loans are blowing up. Like, I feel like over the last couple of years and prior to Pudgy, I've kind of been infamous for like saying something and it coming to fruition. And that's intentional. One, because I believe in myself and I work my ass off to get there. But it's really important that I keep that cadence, because I think as long as my word holds weight, I can drive that attention the way that I want to, and I can ultimately get people really excited about what we're doing. I think about that run up, and I'm glad that things happened the way that they did, because we weren't ready. So I knew the bull market was coming. You know, I'd bought, I'm a big Solana holder, and in November it really started to take off. And I told the team, I said, look, we got a lot of things to figure out. We were just getting the machine of Pudgy Penguins going. And I spoke to Lorenzo, and I said, we need to do an executive retreat ASAP, because I know what's coming. I've been now 3 cycles in. I know what's coming, and we need to prepare. So at the end of December, we go to Napa Valley, we map it out, and I say, hey, look, guys, we have 3 to 6 months to figure it out. This is the plan. This is what I know we need to do. Thankfully, we've gotten the Pudgy Penguin business to a place where it's like very automatic. Every department kind of works on its own. Obviously, everything can be more efficient. We got the business cash flow positive. So, the costs and what we make kind of outweighed, kind of break even or a little bit to the upside. But I said, I know what's coming, and we have to be prepared, and we have to make sure that in this sprint, we make the jump to number 1. Now, while we were at Napa is when things started getting crazy, like crazy. We went from, I think, like right before Napa, we went from like 4 to 10. And then by the time we left Napa, it was like 10 to 20. And I remember talking to the team and just saying, like, we've got nothing coming for them anytime soon, right? Because like everybody, I don't know what the narrative was through the grapevine. People thought we were doing a token, and I was like, that's like the common cope.
Yeah.
Is like, oh, they're doing a token because why is the price going up? What happened with us was we worked so hard and we did such a great job that once price went to a certain level, people just got FOMO, because the narrative that I heard through the grapevine was it was obvious. And it was. We were working our tail off, outperforming everybody with 100 times more money than we do in their treasure, than 100 times more money than us. 30, 40, 50, no matter what it was. Look at any of the top 10 NFT projects. They all were extremely more well capitalized and had tons of time to kind of get where we were. And I felt like we were just outperforming them on every vertical, outperforming them from a business perspective, outperforming them from a community perspective, outperforming them from a headline perspective and a narrative perspective. Anything that I think you could do to basically define a quantifiable metric, we were doing better. And you'd be a biased bag holder to say otherwise. Just like, look at the truth. I know when we're doing good and when we're doing bad. It's just what it was. So that's what I think kind of drove that run. But I was upset because I knew people wanted something. And I was like, well, we got nothing to give you right now. We just came off like a monster Q4. We got the end of the year. We got to take a little bit of a break. Yeah. We kind of kill ourselves here. And so I'm kind of glad that it's stabled out. Obviously, it took its little dip. Nothing in crypto doesn't, go 50% off at some point, right? And we're definitely now in a spot where we're ready to go. And by the time this interview comes out, I should be making some serious noise on the timeline and getting people really excited. And the objective is like from now until the end of the year, put on the nail in the coffin. Show people why there's no other person to bet on, no other IP and community to bet on than the Penguin.
The community is known for its good vibes. Even Yatsu, who I had, I think 2 or 3 days ago, talked about that, right? Very inclusive also of women, which is very rare in crypto.
Yeah.
But mostly good vibes, right? But yet we saw some signs of cockiness when everything was going on, right?
It pissed me off.
And we're not gonna, obviously we don't want to mention other projects.
Yep.
Because it's kind of like in the human nature to be like that.
Totally.
But how do we avoid becoming just another bunch of cocky NFT holders when everything goes up?
So I really tried behind the scenes to stop that. So my answer initially to you would be, it starts from a leadership perspective, and I have to curate the culture. Now, the thing is, I'm not a dictator. I'm not telling people how to act. Like at the end of the day, you have a really expensive NFT and digital identity, and you're not coming here to follow rules. That's not what this is, right? I'll never do that, no matter what. Like, that's just not what it is. But I really tried to set the tone through these inner igloos and through some of these back channels, and just didn't work. Now, I will say, though, and I have to say this, in their defense, the Penguins got laughed at for so long. And the Penguins' life and my life, my personal life, are very similar. And I remember being completely laughed at, always the poorest kid in the room, always had not a dollar to my name, and just completely felt secluded and just like everyone, it wasn't actually like this, but it felt like people were just laughing and pointing their finger at me. And Pudgy's life cycle early on was also like this, right? Everyone laughed at them. Everyone joked, and they were almost like the laughing stock, the ones who should have made it that didn't. And now that we're in a position of strength, I also remember when I became successful that I was like that, right? I was rubbing it in the face of anybody who I thought disrespected me and made fun of me in my time of despair, right? When I wasn't feeling, when I wasn't up to the standard and to the bar that I wanted to be. And I think Pudgy had that moment. We found success. We finally rose to the top against all odds. They laughed at us. We laughed at them back. It felt good. But this next run has to be different. It has to be different, just like me. When I got over that, I evolved past that. I got it out of my system. And I said, I focused on what mattered, which was like legacy and taking it to the next step. And hopefully through pieces of content like this, the community can listen and be like, yeah, he's right.
Yeah.
We had our laugh. We did our thing, not only from floor price, but from all the airdrops. There's no NFT collection that's even come close to performing like we have, right? Over the last, 2 years, we're in a league of our own. And so we have to realize that. Just like when I was, turned 22, I realized I'm in a league of my own. There's no need to be on the internet trying to prove myself and trying to rub it into people's face. We had that chapter, we did it, and now we're turning a new chapter, which is one of legacy.
Especially if that's what's so loved about this community.
Yeah.
Initially, it's people who are builders, humble, not bragging.
But it's human nature, right?
It definitely is
it's
human nature, and
we will evolve. I promise you that.
one of the things that, we talked about airdrops, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to talk about right after that. But like one of the things that you mentioned is, again, talking with Yatsu the other day, he was saying, hey, look, and even talking to Casper from Spartan, who's an early investor. The problem is, it's kind of a double-edged sword with an NFT.
It is.
When the price goes up, people want the price to go up because they're in the community and makes them happy. Pudgy have a good vibe of being people who are chill, but if the price goes up, it becomes sort of luxury asset, right? That makes this community different because it's not that easy to access it anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there is little Pudgies and rods, but what is the role of little Pudgies and rods? Because concretely, I've been evangelizing Pudgy a lot, but most people are like, I can't pay 50K for a little peg, right? Even the little Pudgy are starting to become, now a bit less, but it's still to be very expensive, right?
Yeah.
So that's a problem. If you think about it, it's great for the holders, but you want to build a strong community and like the more people, the better. But if the asset price goes up too much, you can't include these people.
We totally can. You go to your local Walmart and your local Target and you buy some Pudgy toys and you scan that QR code and you make your account. And, there has to be that separation. Like in its traditional form, that NFT is our first edition and it needs to be worth a lot. If my first edition is hollow and anybody can access it, then I don't think it's a good first edition. And there's something to be said about, having that status and that pedigree. I tell people this all the time, but, look at it from a fundamental perspective. What is a PFP that's worth that much money really at the end of the day? It's a status symbol and it's a signal that you're smart or that you were early, right? Now, if the people who know about that PFP are 1 million people or 10 million people, that status symbol becomes that much more relevant and that much more prevalent. I'll give you an example. CryptoPunks is probably, over the course of time amongst rich crypto natives, probably the most popular PFP just because of how long it's been around, because it was the first. What, maybe 1 million people know what a CryptoPunk is? We think that's probably a fair assessment. And so it yields some sort of intrinsic status because 1 million people know what that is. And when you see somebody wearing a CryptoPunk, you subconsciously think, well, that person's smart, that person's early, or that person's rich. And all three of those things, if you're a crypto consumer, signal to you subconsciously that I should probably follow or interact with this guy or listen to what he has to say, because those three things signal something positive for my life if I can kind of absorb what this guy's doing. Now, with the Penguins, the beauty about building the brand is, if we build a brand that, 10 million people know and love, right? That 8,888 is an incredible tool that yields access, the most prestige within the community, and has a network effect that I think is akin to CryptoPunks, but because there's more demand and more people that know and want the first edition, almost like a Pokemon, what makes traditional collectibles valuable is the fact that people know and love, what that collectible represents, whether it's a first edition Charizard or a Michael Jordan Fleer, you have some sort of affinity towards that. And so, it's important that status symbol is not accessible, that people work towards getting that there is, one thing internally we're thinking about is like with the company buying some NFTs because, I want to give it to maybe the person who's not rich, right? But like just goes, the super fan that just does something above and beyond, maybe give a group of people out of that 10 million one day the opportunity to earn that through insane fandom, right? But the point of the matter is those assets, those NFT assets, have to be priced at a premium because I think that's what yields the status. And the beauty of our brand is there's so much for you to consume. I mean, we have $3 toys that you can go out and collect, right? And we have merchandise and plush and content, and you can be a part of the community without owning a Pudgy Penguin NFT. You just don't get the access and all the perks that stuff comes with.
So you really mentioned before that there is two different games being played here.
Yeah.
There is the toys, plushes, online views, kind of mass adoption game. And then there's the crypto game, right?
Yeah.
And that you have to play it if you're in crypto.
Have to.
One of the ways that you've been playing it amazingly well, and that's probably going to continue, is airdrops. We've seen a few NFT communities get handsomely rewarded by protocols launching their tokens. And as we both know, obviously, Pudgy Penguin is one of them. Why does it make so much sense for a new protocol launching their token to airdrop to an NFT community, and sometimes airdrop more tokens to a community that is not using the protocols than to actual users?
Because it comes down to what I said earlier. All tech can get competed away. There is no piece of tech that anybody's building, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 or 4 guys in the entire space, that cannot get competed away. Your X factors are 3 things: community, culture, distribution. Airdropping to NFT projects fulfill those 3 desires. So if you're a tech guy building a new narrative, tapping into a nerve that you think is exciting, if you don't get eyeballs and create excitement around that tech, it will fall on deaf ears and do nothing for you and do nothing for your company, and ultimately will create you a liability. There's been multiple instances now where people airdrop to the Pudgy Penguin community, and all of a sudden, the dynamic within their company changes and with their token changes. And what I mean by that is you now have a group that is championing. You now have a group that is governing, if it's a governance token. You now have a group that is memeing. You now have a group that is staking and participating. You now have a group that is there for you on the defense when you need it. And I think that the people airdropping to these communities can do maybe a little bit of a better job galvanizing and really rallying and integrating. I think a hollow airdrop is maybe not as efficient, but it takes one tweet from one Pudgy Penguin holder, which I think Pudgy Penguins have the most affluent group of holders in the space today in terms of, builders, executives, high net worth power users. It just takes one of them to see another penguin on the timeline shilling it, for them to maybe repost it or quote retweet it, that whatever value you gave the community is reciprocated. Because my read on the crypto industry is as follows: an abundance of brilliant tech minds that I can't even fathom how smart these guys are. I'm not this guy, right? But a lack of abundance on go-to-market, a lack of abundance on distribution, a lack of an abundance on community and culture, and they have no clue what these things are. And as much as I respect them for their brains and the technology that they're building, it is no longer the X factor, especially with AI. Not today, but if you think that tech is how you're going to live and die and how your company is going to succeed, you're in for a rude awakening, especially 5 years from now. I mean, AI is just going to build on top of itself so quickly. Pretty soon, these things will be coding. I'll be able to tell it to go to, study Ethereum, and I'll be able to, in its own way, probably 5 years from now, copy it. And if not, it can support that. And so at a minimum, AI will speed up the process to replication tremendously. And so again, your tech is not a moat. Instagram, the story of Instagram is completely aligned in this. This is not just a crypto thing, right? Tech is generally not a moat in traditional Silicon Valley startups, right? Tech is, Zuckerberg was emailing a CFO when Instagram came around. And it wasn't that they couldn't build the Instagram technology. They could. They needed 6 months to do it. But it was because Instagram was growing so quickly that they were going to own that behavior and basically own that market share. So it was like, we got to buy it, not because, we can't build the technology. We can build the technology, but because, they're gaining users so quickly. And Instagram Reels is a perfect example. TikTok came out of the gate. You know how quickly they cranked out Instagram Reels? It took them a couple months when TikTok really started hitting peak virality for them to copy that. Again, where's the moat? It's in the users, it's in the transaction, it's in the community, it's in the culture. What did Instagram have that Zuckerberg was afraid of? He was afraid that Instagram would solidify itself as the cultural hub, for these images. And by the time he acquired it, that was the case. And that's kind of why the acquisition went through, is because he didn't have 6 months to go and replicate it. And so the moat in this, and again, it comes back to this point that you're going to hear me repeating like a parrot until the end of time, is community, culture, and distribution are the moats, not what type of tech stack you can build. And so airdropping to a community, if you're a super gigabrain developer, is the best thing that you can do, because most of these guys, at no fault to them, it takes, being a developer doesn't necessarily mean, there are two sides of the brain here. Being a developer is not symbiotic with being a good go-to-market marketer, right? Like those are not synonyms. They're probably antonyms, actually. And that's a great way to cheat it, cheat the system. And I think it's great. And the way that I do the math is as follows. It is, as long as it's more positive EV than it is negative EV to do it, they will continue to do it. And as far as I'm concerned, there would have to be real fatigue for that to kind of fall off. And I'm kind of telling our community too, that if it's some like BS $100, we're not endorsing that. You can, because sometimes they try to psyops us, right? And so I'm talking to the community team, and we're making a really big effort where it's like, look, I don't want your airdrop if it's $50. You keep it. You distribute that to somebody else, to a community where the floor price is smaller, where that will make a more meaningful difference. I can tell you a bunch, right? But like when you're a part of our group and the positioning that we're in, we want to get behind the best, and we only want to rally behind 5, 6, 7 of these a year. And then we can give everything else to everybody, which I think, again, the dollar amount also matters in terms of like how this effect actually reciprocates. $50, it's gas fees on a bad day. So people are not going to galvanize behind that. You're not going to get those pros. But if you're a major protocol, again, there's plenty of examples that, raise tons of money, but again, are super smart people, but with no go-to-market strategy. It is the best way to go to market in crypto and cheat your way to the top.
To have some airdrop alpha for the penguin community.
Man, look, I know there's some big people building that own penguins, and I know they've got protocols set to launch by the end of the year. So I would be surprised if we didn't get another one. That's all I can say. And to that point, this is where, it's an interesting value proposition. One that I also kind of want to set the meta in terms of rewarding rares. So the problem, the double-edged sword with this is penguins have lost a little bit of rarity because the floor becomes really valuable because of this, type of income. But through our base layer and the protocols that launch on top of it, I can almost curate and create these opportunities rather than just sit back and wait and hope for them to happen. Right? So when you look at, the elephant in the room, which is like, what do people want in a bull market? They want opportunity. Rather than just like, nudging somebody and like at a dinner table and being like, hey, you got the penguins? I can actually, incubate that internally.
You mentioned the community of holders. We already talked about that in the last podcast, but I have to say, because I talked to most of the big builders in the space, most of them are hyper bullish on Pudgy. I talked to James Wu from DFG, Alex Vanevi, Luke Belmar, Casper from Spartan, Daryl Wang from Tangent, Ryan from Hash, Yasu from Anioka, and every time I basically make them talk about Pudgy so we can clip that and share that to the community.
Thank you for that.
But
Great penguin right here. Give him a follow.
Retweet. Doing my part of the job. But this leads me to two questions. One is positive, one is negative. Which one do you want first?
Negative.
Let's say the less positive one is, if everyone is already in the big builders, who is left to buy and how do we go up from here? Because, again, you say price doesn't matter, but last time you told me number one NFT collection means highest floor price, right?
Yeah, you have to get there. I think it's really simple. And I can tell you this, I'll give you a really honest assessment a couple of weeks ago. We had like a big loan contagion cascade. And I started I bought like a penguin or two. I think that's my photos. Not a big deal. I bought a penguin or two. And I got a pretty big crypto portfolio. I was like, well, why don't I buy 20 or 30? And all the market needs is the winning the sale. And there's so much sideline capital trading meme coins and diverse or, other altcoins or hedge into majors. Because if you know the timing of the cycle, and if you're a good trader, which most people with big size or, tend to know how this stuff works, NFTs are not supposed to run right now. And
exactly.
So
that's true.
Now's not the time where you're deploying capital. I even thought about it. I was like, I would love to buy, I've got like 30 of them now, I would love to get it to 50, but I'm like, I don't want to go against the wins, right? Like it doesn't make sense because there's opportunity, in Solana and these other places. And that's just, and I'm giving you a purely honest answer. And I think it's one of my great advantages is the fact that like I trade, right? And I collect and it's just the opportunity. And now you want to get in early and you want to allocate in early. Like now is actually the time to kind of buy these things. And I'm actually convincing myself to start to make that move and start buying, some sooner rather than later. But that I think is, I think everyone has one, but they could have 20. And I think that's the difference.
You talk about timing, right?
Yeah.
And that's very interesting, especially because you say you're building a layer 2. If you think purely about timing, I don't know how the layer 2 is going to look like, launch a token, whatever, but like, if you think purely about value, because you think about, but I know that's not how you're thinking, right?
No.
But if you think purely about value, you launch your layer 2 when NFTs are already doing really well, right? Which is what Bored Ape did with the Ape coin.
Yep.
How do you think around that?
I don't want to rush this process. I think we've seen two sides of the spectrum in the L2 land. You've seen it rushed as of recent, and you've seen it, take its time over the last couple of years. And I think there's a happy medium.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do this in 3 months, but I don't want to do it in 2 years either.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think we're in this perfect pocket. And so, take it until the end of the year, see where it's at, get people building protocols, get the incentives going, get people excited, get the Penguin feedback. The Penguin feedback is always phenomenal and stellar and helps tremendously. And just see where it goes. The beauty in acquiring Frame is they've been building this thing for 8 months. So it's not like we're just starting from scratch, like twiddling our thumbs. We bought Frame for a reason. One, because I think Saigar and team and Beans are phenomenal. I think they're some of the best developers in the space, and they do this with the best of them. But two, also because, they have a product and they have a team that's been ready to go and been firing on all cylinders for a while now. And so for us, how do we really just, do the things that everybody hasn't done yet, or do the things they have done and do it better, and just time that thing perfectly. I think we will.
I'm sure you will. The other question, the more positive one, but we can go quickly on that, is how did you attract literally all of the biggest brains into the community?
It's one of the reasons why I bought it, because they were already there. I attracted some. I'll give myself a little bit of credit. I mean, I hustled too hard and fly too much and take too many meetings and for that not to be the case. But I would say a good 60, 70% of the big brains were already here. Probably 70% were already here long before me. And that's what made Pudgy so great. Pudgy has, I say this, and I bought it, which is ironic, but Pudgy has the community that you can't buy. You either have it or you don't. I just got lucky enough and I was able to buy into it. They have every major player that matters in the industry from a cultural perspective. When you're talking about crypto culture, they own a penguin, or somebody right next to them, either on the right or the left, owns a penguin. There is not a case of that. And so from our perspective, that's what makes this great. It's like, if I want to be a part of a community, I want to be a part of a community of chats, right? So when I buy a penguin and I rock my penguin and I'm posting good content, whether that's signals or, charts or, political theories and opinions or base takes, if I follow the right people and engage with them, they'll slowly but surely go to my page. And if my page provides them value, then they will follow me. And then all of a sudden I'm building a network of chats. Mm-hmm. And that's the premium. That's why it's worth 50 grand. That's why hopefully one day it's worth $1 million. Mm-hmm. Because I remember back long before NFTs were around, I paid $100,000 a year for a mastermind. It was one of the best things I ever did, because networking is invaluable. It's not what you know, it's who you know. 95% of all of my income and money I've ever made has been because of who I know, not what I know. And in crypto, this is an alpha-driven market. If you're not getting alpha, you are playing a losing game. I've learned this the hard way. I now see it for what it is, and obviously I'm behind the scenes in ways that most people are not. This is a alpha-driven market. People are running things behind the scenes, and if you are just straight up retail and don't have a group that has some access to somebody that gives you an edge, you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. And that's what you see, right? Like there's a small sub-segment that wins because they have that edge and they have that alpha, and the rest just ultimately lose and end up on Coinfessions.
I love that you're just saying things out loud that no one really wants to talk about.
It's just the truth.
It's just complete truth. Absolutely. I read this tweet about made by a seed phrase a couple of weeks ago, where he says, in a nutshell, that he thinks that token launches is what will kickstart the next big NFT wave.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I agree that there needs to be something exciting. Like, you gotta bring some momentum back to the market. And I think from our perspective, you're doing a chain and ultimately like that will be a token, and giving the opportunity to Penguins to govern and participate in that. People know what that means and know what that's going to do for NFTs. Because Penguin specifically, when we run, everything else runs. Not only on Ethereum, on Solana, on Bitcoin. I mean, we've done it now 2-3 times. But when other projects run, they don't take the whole market with them. When we run, we take the entire market with us. And that's what the market needs. I was working on Project Save NFT, right? I called it Project Save NFTs because it needs saving. There needs to be an exciting take. And at the end of the day, what gets people excited in crypto is making money. And everybody knows what a Pudgy, acquired chain and token with like our, brains and hands and our community, in it, with that all-star team and Saigar and crew with some of the other pieces that have since been put together. They know what that means. And the Penguins know that they're going to be a part of that in the biggest way. And I think that's going to be one of the huge catalysts, along with like all the other things that come in this whole sprint that is Project Save NFTs, which while you're watching this should be in full force and should be happening. It's going to be a huge momentum boost. So I'm excited for it. And I agree with seed phrase.
Okay.
And I think there needs to be something a little more, right? So I'm not just coming with that. I'm coming with multiple things. You should see some of these things already by the time you listen to this. I'm coming fully faceted, and I'm just going to take over. And anybody who ever faded the Penguin is just going to be like, again, face palm. It was obvious. It's going to be obvious this time around.
I'm already a Pudgy holder. I have a few, but like you give me fucking 4 more. Last time, actually, when I talked to Alex, and he was like, one thing when you talk with Luca is you really get bullied. NFTs are communities.
Yeah.
There's another thing that's community. Meme coins. What's your take on meme coins?
I think meme coins are great. I wrote a whole article. If you go to my Substack, Future of Culture is Tokenized. I think they play a huge role. But again, it's not my place to say, and nor am I going to be a whistleblower here. But again, I think 99% of people watching this don't know what's really going on behind the scenes. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to allude to anything greater than that. But that's also not fair to meme coins. There's also a lot of things for a lot of these other tokens that you guys don't see behind the scenes that is pretty ridiculous. I believe in it.
How dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you?
I totally believe in it. But people think that they disrupt or they kill NFTs, and they couldn't be more wrong. There is so much more camaraderie around NFTs, I feel like, just because of the identity layer. I think NFTs and meme coins can be paired, though. Like, one thing I really like, I'll give a shout out to the Remelios and Mog, right? They almost like pair the two. That's an interesting frame to things, I think. The pairing, but to think that a meme coin takes market share from an NFT, sure, it takes attention and takes liquidity, but wait till NFTs start running. Because the beauty of NFTs is like, once ETH is like $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000, people are like, how do I compound ETH? There's only one way to go, right? And you know what I found with meme coins that people don't really realize? And it actually really pissed me off, but I'll give you guys an analogy. I put 5,000 SOL in a Phantom, and every night before I go to bed, I spend 15 minutes trading and just shooting the shit. I think it's really important because I have to stay on the forefront of trends. So I can't lose the pulse. Like, people want to, it's fun because I can make some money and I'm pretty good at it, but more because it's like, I want to understand the culture. I want to understand what people are doing. It's good that I know the new apps, right? Photon and all these things. Like, it's important. And it's 5,000 SOL. Call it $500,000 or call it $750,000 for the sake of the conversation. Bought a bunch of meme coins, whatever. Meme coins performed. Then SOL went from 150 to 210. And my 20% on meme coins got outperformed by my 30% on Solana. And what I really want, the whole reason why I'm trading meme coins, because I want more Solana. I don't want more dollars. Like, I want more SOL. I believe in Solana, right? And that's where the mechanism ends up crushing. And that's why I think NFTs can get really exciting. It's because it's like, I want more ETH. The right NFT project outperforms stake ETH.
Is a levered bet on ETH, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so from my perspective, it's like that's the story that you want to tell. I want you to take your staked ETH out of your 5% pool, because it's like, I promise you, Pudgy Penguins over the course of 5 years will outperform 5% a year.
I think it's Mike Dudas who said that.
Yeah.
He said, I stake my ETH in Pudgy Penguin. I think it's him, but like,
I think it was
Which
Mike
makes-
that said that too. But that's
it
something
makes so much sense. Yeah.
that's the way I've been feeling. That's why I'm like shocked that CryptoPunks, a lot of ETH ICO guys haven't noticed that. Like CryptoPunks should be a couple hundred ETH for that reason alone. You're telling me the first digital 10,000 identity should not be worth hundreds of Ethereum because for some reason it hasn't clicked in their head. They're staking all their ETH for 5%. But if you actually look at the math, is 5% compounded. If that's what I need to beat, I'll beat that any time. Maybe in a bear market there'll be a down year and that will fluctuate, but over the course of a 5-10 year horizon, the right NFT project, which I think there are a couple, will outperform staked ETH any day of the week. And that's the horizon in which I'm looking at things. And where I think a lot of the exposures can come from. People want to compound the native token. That's why I buy meme coins. But when there's a huge run, you get caught kind of like wavering out and being like, damn, I made a mistake. I thought about that. I all my meme coins are green, but my 5,000 souls now like 4,600. And I'm like, huh? I spent the last 7 nights, like 15 minutes a night, like buying these things and I've still somehow lost money. Like I want soul. I don't want dollars.
There's a part on this podcast that we introduced since last time, which is called Crypto Alpha, where I ask the founders who their favorite teams and projects are. Not in terms of price, but more in terms of, I like this team because what are the maybe 1 or 2 teams that you really like?
From a protocol
why?
perspective or an NFT perspective?
You choose.
LayerZero is probably the most Chad-based group in all of crypto.
Why?
You can just tell they're the smartest. It's just like evidently clear, and it's pretty biased. Brian's the best CEO, best marketer, handles it from A to Z. Everybody over there is an unbelievable professional. Every time I speak to them, I get impressed. They work so quick. They get it done, and I think everything just speaks for itself. I think they're up there with one of the best, if not the best. Again, I don't know enough teams to, I'm going to expand my horizons here. I think from an NFT perspective, the dark horse is Doodles. It's glaringly obvious. The problem is, and I tell Julian this all the time, is like they need to do a better job being crypto native, and they're just not. But from a brand building perspective, they're putting on a clinic. I'm loving some of these Bitcoin builders. They're putting the guys who made ordinals. From an ordinals perspective, everyone talks about everything except for ONB. ZK Shark is OMB is a class of its own, and I say this is something that I own nodes. I own, I probably actually own more node monkeys because ZK got me really early in on those. But OMBs and ZK Shark, I think if you're betting on ordinals, that's the bet to make. Obviously UDI too, so it would probably be UDI and ZK. I like to bet on execution. I think there's this narrative that people are like, I don't want to bet on execution risk. And I think that is the lamest thing ever. All of the upside in life when you're making big investments are made on betting on execution risk. Anything else is totally lame. I don't know. So this idea that like you don't want to bet on execution risk, that's the only bet I want to make because that's the only one with explosive upside. Anything else has a real ceiling to it. Even when you look at something like Doge doesn't run without Elon. Like there was no execution risk, but there's a driving force behind that. And if he doesn't do what he's supposed to do on SNL or something, then obviously execution risk is the frame in which you put it. And then I want to give the right people their flowers. I like Wobbit Seals. I think the fact that he's still just pushing through I think it's phenomenal. But let me give you like another protocol. Wasabi. So people don't know this, but I actually believe there'll be multiple projects that hit 100 ETH floor from a PFP perspective this cycle. And I think there'll be one or two, I'm betting on myself, to go to 200 plus. And the reason why is because of the unlocks of leverage in NFTs. So I made a tweet that basically said, 2017 coins, 2017 to 2020 coins are akin to 2021 NFTs to 2024 NFTs. And the point that I was really trying to make was study leverage, right? 2020's run was initially kickstarted by DeFi Summer, which was the unlock of leverage, right? True on-chain leverage. Obviously, you had perps on Binance, but, I think the ability to like take huge loans and collateral against a lot of people's positions is ultimately why we blew up, but ultimately why we ran in the first place. I think NFTs are going to see the same thing. If you understand how traditional finance works, traditional finance is completely ran on margin and leverage, right? Like that is how this money sloshes around and why the ETF is so big. NFTs are going to have ridiculously violent moves once we start catching a bid. It's going to be violent to the upside and to the downside. Just be ready for it. It's going to be volatile. So actually, I'm glad for this little dip in volatility that we got, because it's going to get crazy out there. It's going to get crazy. I'm certain of it because of this unlock. And that, I think, is going to drive prices so much higher than anybody can possibly imagine, because just study what leverage does to markets. And so Wasabi is a company that, basically is mastered at, actually being able to leverage those things, add leverage to NFTs, whether through call options and other things, longs and shorts. And I think things are going to get really explosive through them. And obviously, Gmonad, we like Monad. So I actually think they're putting on a masterclass, really inspired from a protocol perspective and from a chain perspective, how in tune they are with culture and community. Keon's taught me a lot of things the last couple of months, and I look forward to implementing.
What's your message to the Pudgy community out there?
Oh, and shout out Nansen. He just did a whole P&L feature that's just like super badass. And shout out CoinGecko. Obvious ones. I don't think I should mention that, but two other great teams. What is my message for other founders out there? Culture, community, and distribution. That's my message.
To the Pudgy Penguin community.
Oh, sorry. What's my message to the Pudgy Penguin community? Our time is coming. The time should be happening as you watch this. We need to lock in and we need to be humble. I think you brought that up. We need to learn from our mistakes. I can tell you that I was a little upset. Maybe I think some other holders are upset with how I think we handled things, but it's human nature and we move past it. We have bigger fish to fry. We have to go further than any NFT has ever gone. And we cannot talk shit until we flip the punk. At least if you want to talk shit, flip the punk.
Yeah.
That's the only flip that ever mattered anyway. The whole Bored Ape, whatever, we got to pay homage for Bored Ape. And
that's what Yatsu told me the other day. He bought 10 Bored Apes. Asked why, he said just he's bullish, but also he said as a thank you just for what Bored Ape did to the NFT community. So you can't attack them because they've been doing more good than probably any other project to the NFT community. And you were the one flipping the Bored Apes in your meetings, right? You were saying
you've got to pay homage, and that's not the flip that matters even. So they're working hard. They have shown us a lot, and a huge reason of what they've gone through has put us in the position that we're in. But the only one that's ever mattered was the punk. Nothing else matters to us, I think, from my perspective. We got to take the punk. This is the stretch to do it. We've got to do it with grace. We've got to do it locking arms. And now's the time to rock that Penguin PFP, to proliferate the IP, to be on the timeline memeing, to be doing the funny copy and pastas, not the negative copy and pastas. Those are negative EV. But now's the time to lock arms. I told the team this. I'm gonna kill myself these next 6 months. So I'm ready. I'm gonna put it all on the line. I'm gonna do everything I know how to do to get us to where we need to be. I'm gonna take a big break on New Year's, but I'm gonna take all my learnings these last 2 years and put on a clinic. So if you're a Pudgy community member and you're listening to this, All I need is your support, a like, a retweet, a comment, your own set of championing, your own set of, being happy for the things that we've accomplished. We try to consolidate things, but now's the time. It's lock-in time. I've been on a hiatus the last 3 months. I know that. I appreciate your patience, but it's go time.
Our time is coming. Thank you so much for that, man. That was awesome.
Thank you, boss.